This is the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpauir.
Hi, Aaron. How are you doing?
Hey, Mike. I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. And I'm, believe it or not, excited to discuss Federalist 7. We've already talked about everything that came before, but to say it one more time, 3, 4, and 5 of the Federalist Papers form a unit, and 6, 7, and 8 form a unit as well. All of them are about the necessity of the Union. In particular, Federalist 7 is a continuation of the subject with particular causes enumerated. That subject carried over from Federalist 6 is concerning dangers from war between the states. As you see in Federalist 6, proximity breeds enmity. And so as we proceed through Fed 7, we need to pay attention to the way that the lessons are applied to the states themselves, in particular, the lessons of human nature. The city is man writ large here. The states do not behave differently from human beings. In fact, I think what's really neat is, as much as I've said, I feel as if Machiavelli's all over the page on Fed 6. There's a little bit of John Locke here in Fed 7, I will argue, and I think there's a little bit of Thomas Hobbes in Fed 8, I will argue as well.
So I think we get a continuation of Publius's account of human nature in Fed 7, even before we get into the causes of war. Maybe not the causes of war, but the venues in which human nature will accelerate war. Here is a list from Fed 7: avarice, jealousy, temerity, imprudence, illiberality, injustice, a disposition to retaliation, love of power, desire of preeminence and dominion, the jealousy of power, and the desire of equality and safety. You take those, you compound them with the problems that will plague the country should the Union dissolve: territorial disputes involving Western land, rules of commerce, and debt, laws in violation of private contracts between states. And the result, to just give a summary of Fed 7 before we do a deep dive, is that we do not want to be Europe. The United States should not become a series of powerful, enterprising nation states at constant war with one another. So we can think about not only the dangers that lie ahead, but the peculiar blessings of union that have to do with shared history, with geography. So there's a real feeling here when you read that the United States is a blessed country, but how quickly it could go wrong. It could go wrong because of the political problems of life on a continent, and it could go wrong because of what unites all men: human nature.
Yeah, that's right. So you see all of the characteristics or facets of human nature from Fed 6 carrying into Fed 7. And I'd like to point out this line as well, just to show my work here. This is at the end of paragraph 3. Like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage. So let's not worry about all of the multiple syllable words there. The point is the likening of individuals to states and vice versa. There's no reason to expect them to behave differently, simply because there's a greater number. And so as we move through Fed 7, we see the application of the lessons from Fed 6 that you pointed out to us, Aaron, to the states themselves. And it's about disagreements between the states. Interests, varying interests. Size is going to matter. Commerce is going to matter, as you've said. And we see how pregnant each of the states is with the nature or mischiefs or dangers that were discussed in Fed 6. Let's start with territorial disputes here. If you look at Fed 7 and number your paragraphs, as one should do, you see that paragraphs 2 through 4 are on territorial disputes. Several states are claiming their territory runs from where they happen to live now on the East Coast approximately, all the way to the West Coast. So right now, how are you going to make decisions about this? Yeah, from here until you hit water again, and it's the salty ocean water, that's us. That's our land. Publius's argument is very straightforward here. Without union, there will be nothing but violence or the threat of violence to settle these territorial disputes. So there will be disputes. How are you going to solve them? If I may go to paragraph 3, I said, look, I see a little bit of Locke here. Let me point out the language and see what you think here. Paragraph 3 in Federalist Paper number 7. In the wide field of Western territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. To reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. So I trust you see why I'm bringing up John Locke's second treatise, without an umpire or common judge. Well, where there is no umpire or common judge, that is, for Locke, the state of nature. And when you're in the state of nature and then enter into a state of war where somebody's violated the law of nature, you must make an appeal to heaven. Now, Publius does not say an appeal to heaven here, but he does say the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. So to put yourself into the hands of a broken up union would be to put yourself into the hands of a very unsafe, very unsecure condition, to use Lockean language, where men, no great observers of equity and justice, are likely to violate what Locke might call your rights, is over property. So it's a perfectly Lockean concern, because here we're talking about territory. What's territory? Property. What's Locke so concerned with time and time again throughout the second treatise? Of course, he's rightly concerned with property. And you realize why you now want a union, you students of John Locke's second treatise of government? Because it's going to make an umpire, a common judge to whom you may appeal. That is not simply just an appeal to heaven, an appeal to the sword, an appeal to bloodshed, where might makes right. Here you can have an arbiter.
Something
So,
mild.
Say again, excuse me?
Something more mild.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be. It should be, yeah.
Thinking of the common umpire or judge, we should pay attention when reading the Federalist, especially in the earlier papers, to see how Publius shows us the union is going to work. One, because we want to be able to track the rhetorical movement. How does he introduce this new government to his readers who he is asking to approve of it? But also, if we want to understand our Constitution now, we should understand how Publius understood it too. And you don't have here a national government setting out national policy, embarking on the political seas with regards to Europe or commercial policy. Really what you have is a government that can settle disputes between the states, a government that can do what the Articles of Confederation was supposed to be able to do, prevent the states that constitute it from going to war. And so Publius refers to an incident between Pennsylvania and Connecticut in paragraph 3, the circumstance of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania respecting the lands of Wyoming admonishes not to be sanguine in expecting any easy accommodations of such differences. The Articles of Confederation oblige the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. Connecticut wasn't very happy, till by negotiation and management, something like an equivalent was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. I'm not sure still I have an idea of how the Constitution is going to be a common judge differently than the Articles of Confederation. What do you think here?
Yeah, well, of course, I'm always going to go to the fact that there's going to be navigable waterways, for instance, that are not going to belong necessarily to one state in particular, that you're not going to be able to impose duties and tariffs coming in and out of your state, which we're going to see soon enough. Something Publius will argue is a danger if we don't have union. So pretty much by way of having a common judge or umpire who's going to limit what it is that you as a state can do, that union secured by way of the Constitution should limit the capacity or possibility of disputes by saying, look, you're not in actually this business. But we're sitting here now in the business like the Articles were, but much more robustly, of determining state lines and interstate relations. This is not a firm league of friendship. the United States Constitution. That's the Articles of Confederation, a firm league of friendship. This is actually a superordinating power that has a take care clause and a supremacy clause. So when it comes down to it, you might not be happy with the way that the court decided something or with certain laws that are being made, but the supremacy of the federal government regarding the United States of America should be pretty apparent when it comes to negotiation and management betwixt the states. It is the arbiter. So that's nice. So if it's a firm league of friendship, all of a sudden, as in the case of the Articles of Confederation, why am I leaning on that Continental Congress to make decisions between us? Who are you to tell us how to negotiate these things? Under the Constitution as proposed here, the answer is you ratified this Constitution and we have this much energy to resolve these disputes. So I think that's the way that you can see it.
And I think at back of this, we have to remember, right, a judge makes a decision. Ultimately, that decision may have to be enforced, and their force comes into play. The determinations of the national constitution will have to be final, and state nullification is going to come up as a question down the road fairly quickly, involving some of the players in the Federalist debate. And perhaps the answer is, well, Connecticut, if you aren't willing to accept the decision, then appeal to the sword, right? And this is a government that is going to be able to raise an army, that is going to be able to put down rebellion. The experience before drafting of the Constitutional Convention made the founders want the power to put down insurrection or rebellion in the hands of the president and the Congress. So we have to think, and you reminded me of this with the take care clause, that one of the things that judge has to be able to do is know that his rulings will be enforced.
Yeah. And we are talking about that. We are talking about internal matters here. So the government has to itself to be able to resolve these disputes. Now, the police power can be maintained inside of the states, but there's a difference between North Carolina or Connecticut having the police power regarding its citizens, but that's different from disputes between New York and Vermont. This is a very interesting paper in no small part because it realizes it's admitting that government must have the energy proportionate to its ends. And having the energy proportionate to your ends in this context, which that line that I'm saying there is a feature of Publius's political science. It's a matter of natural science as well, of course, right? You're going to move something. You have to be strong enough to move the thing. You must have the energy or strength or power, whatever word you want me to use, to exact those ends. Here, that energy or strength or power that the union will offer is proportionate to our understanding of the following. The final sentence, which I'm reading again of paragraph 3, states, like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage. So you're going to acquiesce with great reluctance. How can I make sure that that great reluctance does not preclude you from acquiescing? How can I guarantee that you will? I don't like this. We're going to hopefully appeal. You're going to say those sort of things, but nonetheless, you're going to say, I have to acquiesce. So Publius's political science, I think, is already on display without being announced. You have to have energy proportionate to the ends. It's rooted in an understanding of human nature and also our experience of that nature as is played out throughout human history, and in particular, the immediate history of the United States. Territorial disputes are a big problem, not susceptible to pacific adjustment. It's going to take something of force or strength where someone raises their voice. And in this case, it's not even going to, the United States Constitution or the federal government's not going to have to raise its voice. It's just going to have to simply admit, hey, we're solving this problem between you. And then again, keeping the theme of property going. We move from territorial disputes, which are discussed in paragraphs 2 through 4. The 5th through 7th paragraph here in Federalist 7 are about commerce. So again, the theme continues. The Lockean themes continue. It's very easy, the argument here. Once the union is dissolved, the people in the states will feel themselves sovereign. Commerce without union, in so few words, will lead to privateering. It should even lead to certain things that, while we might look at it with some sort of twinkle in our eye, it will lead to smuggling. And I mean in the sense I'm thinking of booze smuggling during Prohibition, but it will lead to black markets. It will undermine the market as something that occurs in broad daylight, because everyone will be avoiding state taxes and state regulations. States themselves would try to avoid taxes by making others their tributaries. So everybody's going to have to pay tribute to New York in order to do business in New York. This sort of stuff. And you can see how that's going to create a black market, how this is a problem. Commerce is another fruitful source of contention, continuing the theme first established in the previous Fed paper, paragraph 8 of Federalist Paper 6. We've been going after commerce and those who think that commerce itself will make people pacific. Commerce, right on the heels of territorial disputes, people are going to fight with each other over commerce. Now, I want to underline this point. Publius does not then say, because of this, we should get rid of commerce. It just needs to be stated, right? Commerce is a problem. It was a problem in 6. No, that's not right. Commerce is a problem in Fed 6 when it's understood as the anti-Feds understand it. Commerce is a problem in Fed 7 when it is existing without a union. And that's the same in Federalist Paper number 6. Commerce is here to stay. We're a commercial people. We're going to found a commercial republic. And in order to make that work, we have to have union. So I hope that's okay. I just wanted to underline, look, we're criticizing commerce here because of the way in which the anti-federalists and those who are against union in the proposed constitution think that commerce will save us all. No. We have to have commerce. It's essential to our liberty, but commerce alone is not going to save us. In fact, it's going to give us cause for war, Publius argues.
Is there a sense in which commerce is taking the role of honor as a cause for war? So in our edition, I have italicized font here in paragraph 5. The habits of intercourse on the basis of equal privileges, to which we have been accustomed from the earliest settlement of the country, would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have, independent of this circumstance. So just like with land, we had earlier worked out a system of land. Now that system is gone, that we are disunited. We're going to be fighting over land again, possibly with a renewed and increased acrimony. And here are the italics. We should be ready to denominate injuries, those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent sovereignties consulting a distinct interest. So the problem with disunion is that interests are made distinct. Instead of having one interest, you have 13 different ones or 50 different ones. Yeah, that term injury, to me, plays on a matter of pride that goes beyond simple calculation, goes beyond the balance sheet. Honor would have been the cause of war in a monarchical or aristocratic society, as Publius is quick to point out in a previous paper we discussed. But commerce isn't going to save us, not only because commerce produces great causes of war, countries seeking their own preferment, avoiding taxes with one another, but because maybe the human heart seeks honor, vindication, to use some of Publius's words, avarice acts to create jealousy, liberality. And so we're returning to this language that has a lot to do with honor, the thing that we're supposed to have left behind in Europe.
It's an interesting way of thinking about it. Well, if we look at the big 3 salient characteristics of all men from Federalist Paper number 6, being rapacious is one of them. And so that drives industriousness. Why would I ever condemn the desire to acquire? I would say in Federalist 6, as I'm thinking about Prince chapter 3, what I would condemn or blame, is failing to acquire. So the judgment of these things, you'll notice that Publius doesn't judge them. He just simply says, here's human nature, and it's what spurs us to war with each other. And again, he doesn't try and cut it out of us as much as try and control the effects of it through union. And I think the same thing here, because if you pick up where you left off in paragraph number 5 in Fed 7, just after the italics, the spirit of enterprise which characterizes the commercial part of America has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved. So that's a fact. The spirit of enterprise is improving in America. It is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. So the unbridled spirit of enterprise has a sort of lawlessness about it. That's what the word unbridled points to anyway, right? It's not constrained. It's not a horse which is bridled. It's unbridled, unconstrained. So enterprise itself seems here to be a wild horse, if I can stick with that, who's very spirited by the landscape of America, where the ground is so fertile, the opportunity is so vast, there are no social structures that are freezing people in place. And I'm ambitious and I love power and I want dominion. And I'm also really greedy. Guess what Publius is now offering me in Federalist Papers 6, 7, and 8? Security in my endeavor of being enterprising or industrious. Because if I don't have the union, my line of work, or whatever that might be, but my desire, my character that seeks to just feed by way of my industriousness is going to have a much tougher go of it. Is there a cake? And may I eat it too here through the union? He's not overtly saying, hey, Mike, with all of your greed and ambition and industriousness, this is why you want this. But why is it? I mean, it's right there on the page. Without union, territorial disputes will lead to war. Commerce will lead to war. So that is to say, you can acquire territory through the union and be secure in your territory through the union. You can take up commerce through the union and even be very productive and enterprising and continue to improve the commercial part of America and your own life.
And let me ask you, in the way that Publius draws a line between states and men, to read that line again at the end of paragraph 3, states, like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance, determinations to their disadvantage. You've noted, and I've noted in the past, that Publius is offering a civic education to individuals here. Publius is not simply content to give us this constitution, to slap it on the hood of the car and say, this baby will go. That additionally, as citizens who have some share in maintaining this government, we need to not only learn how it works, but maybe even develop a set of virtues that'll conduce to its maintenance. We need to learn maybe not how to be good mechanics, but good drivers of the thing. Is there additionally a civic education going on for states?
This is interesting. This is a very interesting question you ask. Look, we can see that the states themselves are likely to be progenitors of war. The states, as I've said, are made up of men. So that means the men are likely to be progenitors of war. There's not an education of states qua states. There's an education, I could be incorrect about this. I think it's a really interesting question you ask, but the education here is still of the individuals who might understand my country not merely being Virginia, but being the United States of America with a superordinating power in order to bring about peace through union. That's an education that I'm receiving as a citizen who's now voting to ratify this Constitution. I feel very comfortable making that argument. You might be on to something. But once I come to see that the states aren't that upright and that the states are going to be a cause of war, I'm undergoing an education regarding the goodness of my country, Virginia. You know, you see what I'm also playing with there. You know, of course, we learned that anytime you read with students, you're reading stuff from Jefferson and he's talking about country. The students are thinking of country in America and not thinking of Virginia. So that's what I'm riffing on right now. I don't know. What do you think of my response? And were you thinking of something else there?
No, I wanted to see where you might go with it. I agree with you. I think I would add that in giving the government energy sufficient to be able to enforce the law, to make judgments, to be able to set a national policy, when the rubber does hit the road, when you do have Virginia and Kentucky writing resolutions stating that the Alien Sedition Acts are unconstitutional, or South Carolina nullifying laws, you are giving the federal government power, if it is in the right hands, to educate the states. Whereas previously, any issue of this degree might have caused a state to walk out of the Union, which would have been far easier under the Articles of Confederation. I mean, we are talking here about the serious possibility. We are assuming here even that the states are going to be disunited. Why would Publius be giving us a long series of essays about what might happen if the states are disunited if he doesn't think that that is a reality or a serious possibility?
Well, I think he sees it, Aaron, on this point. He's saying you can see this already in the behavior of the states under the Articles. You read it to us earlier regarding Connecticut. He's going to go on and speak about New York and Vermont in the fourth paragraph of Federalist Paper number 7. He's showing us evidence from our immediate experience under the Articles of the Confederation. So your experience of human beings and your experience of human nature should be one thing. And then now also your experience that states are but men who behave in these various ways when it comes to territorial disputes, commerce. Hey, I don't want to pay a debt. Why do I want to pay a debt off? I mean, look at the insight, if I may. Look at the insight on public debt of the U.S., which is the third big cause of war, which he discusses in Federalist Paper number 7. That's in paragraphs 8 and 9. The public debt of the Union would be a further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. How about this insight into human beings, which is so obviously true, that of course is then going to be the way that they're going to behave as states. It's about 2/3, maybe a little over halfway through paragraph 9 of Federalist 7. In addition to all these other problems, he says, the reluctance with which men commonly part with their money for purposes that have outlived the exigencies which produce them and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. This is in a chapter that I feel like just reminds so much of Locke. There's this beautiful Machiavellian point. Past benefits are not sufficient to maintain a sense of obligation. And then furthermore, because all of those previous benefits are easily forgotten in light of current necessity. And so sure, I may have debts which I acquired in order to save myself 2 years ago, but I'm safe now. Why do I need to pay off that debt? And furthermore, I do want to go buy a new state-of-the-art air-conditioned mattress. So I'm not going to pay you back. And here, that's what states are, because that's what human beings are. That's what men are. Look at, as he continues this paragraph, Publius says that there is nothing men differ so readily about as the payment of money. The city is man writ large here. So I'm going to double down on my answer to you. Yeah. The education of the states is occurring through the education of us, who then make up the states and are going to forfeit some of our sovereignty that we enjoyed under the Articles of Confederation. Because now what we should understand is that was actually insecurity. We were unsecure there. Next up, laws in violation of private contracts. And then finally, incompatible alliances between the states and foreign nations. That's pointing back to the problems discussed in Federalist Papers 3 through 5. Divide and rule, we get at the end of this.
What an effective argument. I laughed thinking about it. So trying to remember all the times reading the Federalist that I laugh. My students right now are reading Brutus 1, Fed 10, the first paragraph of Fed 47, and Fed 51. And when I walked into class on Monday, after giving it to them for homework reading, I could tell that they hadn't been doing much laughing. They understood it, but they didn't find it funny. I did laugh here because I was thinking any reader is going to come across that observation about human nature, which is as true as humans are jealous, short-sighted, illiberal, and either think maybe shamefacedly of themselves or of some jerk they went on with on some dumbbells or a couple of beers, right? Everyone understands this. And this is a way certainly in which the state is, as you say, man writ large. That sometimes it is difficult to compare states to people, right? If when times are tough, should a state tighten its belt is a recurring question in economics in the way that an individual should. But here, at least in their instinct to cooperate, and that the states are right now in a limited way cooperating is one of surely the blessings of the Union that could be lost soon should our political bands be dissolved. It's true, but I know people like this. You know people like this. We've both had experiences like this. The Venmo just doesn't come in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's why you should just, if a friend needs money, you should just give it to them. Not loan it to them. But unfortunately, what we're talking about here is serious business. And I believe in one of our previous conversations, you reminded us of the shortcoming, the defect of the Articles of Confederation to pay off debts. Those debts need not be simply to Britain or to France. What about the debt to you as a soldier? So there's another way in which we know, look, the debts are going to cause a problem. And so without a union, which at this point, it's not just merely a union, but it's also an energetic constitution that's operating inside of that union to raise taxes, to pay off debts, we are ripe for civil war. Because this is, again, we're still looking internally here. It applies outside to international affairs because that could be a just reason for someone to make war against you, Publius argued in the previous tranche of readings regarding international affairs. But shouldn't it also be a just reason for us to make war internally? You're not paying your debts. So these problems are really serious things here. And I think what I would like to say is, while I don't think Publius is judging my greed in terms of my enterprisingness, he has to be very low on a whispering level judging this aspect of us. Because in the previous tranche, we saw this as an aspect of justice and injustice. Real or pretend causes of war, you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And then you can make war justly if somebody owes you something and is not paying it back. This is why you would break up with that friend who you were thinking about earlier, justly perhaps. And so here, when you have men who do not want to pay off their debts because of their immediate wants, and they no longer feel the necessity that led them to acquire the debt in the first place, you can infer that Publius is saying this is an injustice that lies within the hearts of men. And so what he's going to do to try and control for this injustice is not get rid of the cause of it so much. He can try by getting rid of the reasons why we would incur the debts in the first place. I think that could happen, but also trying to control for its effects by being able to say, you have to pay. You states have to pay, which means you citizens have to pay. And let's underline this now. The United States Constitution doesn't need the states to reach into my pocket. Look at that. There's another answer to your question about, are we educating the states? We're leapfrogging over them directly into the pockets of the United States citizens. So I don't think that this view of human nature is unidimensional. I think it's more complicated than it might appear. And I think the moral arguments here are more complicated. At times, he's not judging, he's solving problems. And at other times, you have to say, look, he's judging. But that would be besides the rhetorical or educational project here. You catch more flies with honey sort of argument. I want to say this before we leave behind Fed 7. I don't think Publius is so closed off to the argument of democratic peace as he appeared in Fed 6.
Oh, interesting.
I think now in 7, we're starting to get a better sense of the union, that a good republic that's allied through a strong union is less likely to make war with itself. We're dealing with the problem of internal wars in Federalist Paper 6, 7, and 8. If we make our republic a big, strong union, then we might have something that starts to remind us of those theories of democratic peace back in Fed 6, but we've had to modify them severely. It's not just democratic nations that trade with each other are going to be pacific. No. All that stuff could easily be a powder keg. We have to constrain it and insulate it inside of a union. Okay, now I'm ready to have a conversation that at certain times will sound like democratic peace. I think that's going on here too.
And we're left at the end with the specter of an addition turning into Europe being conquered by Europe.
Mm-hmm.
The states with knives at each other's throats would be vulnerable to an armada sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, landing, and then being conquered by, well, whoever, England, France, Spain. But Federalist 8 which we will discuss in our next episode, is going to be about standing armies positioned on the borders, depriving Americans of their rights. Is there anything more to say about Fed 7?
Yeah, I just want to point out also, as we continue to see how far we've come since Federalist 2 in particular, that beautiful paper with the thrice blessings, the seeming American exceptionalism, you can now see, hey, that stuff's not sufficient. This was the last point you were making about opening us up to European politics and European wars. You can see now that the water isn't enough to stop that. If we don't have union, we will be divided. And if we are divided, we will be ruled. I don't want to be ruled. I want to be free. We don't have rulers in this country. We have representatives. So be unified under the union. And as we will come to see very shortly announced in Federalist 9, we'll also have representatives and not rulers. Without union, we're going to have rulers. Yeah, that's good. Well, I like this paper. I think that you can see, as 6 is to Machiavelli, 7 is to Locke, 8 is to Hobbes. And I think it's really cool. I mean, of course, in a paper about the necessity of property, where you're confirming that people will have property, because notice Publius doesn't just say, and in order to get rid of these territorial disputes, we're going to get rid of the notion of private property.
Yeah.
And in order to get rid of these problems of commerce, we're just going to get rid of commerce. Publius doesn't say any of those things. He confirms their place in a liberal, that is to say, liberty-based government, and then says, but they are not capable of securing their own conditions. You need additional safeguards. Without union, your property, your commercial way of life is, to quote Locke, very unsafe, very unsecure. That's how Locke characterizes the state of nature, which is always teetering on the state of war. Hence, very unsafe, very unsecure. That's what we're going to be in without a union. And in fact, it's going to be so fast, I think. Is this too much, Aaron? I think it's going to be so fast that we move into a state of war, that you're not going to have time to smell the roses and peaceably enjoy your property. It's going to happen because there's already interests, there's already proximity. So it's really neat to read it in this way, I think. We move from regime type as not sufficient to solving the problem. It doesn't matter what kind of regime you're in Fed 6, to now what you need is a structure over everything, an umpire, Fed 7. Yeah, in order to secure you and your property. Otherwise, that property is going to lead you to kill other people or be killed by other people.
And a good argument, just to add on, for federal lands. Lands retained by the government, not belonging to any other state, not ready to be disputed by any other state.
I don't know. I mean, now you're getting a little crazy. I don't know what you're saying over there with this. Can you say more so I can make sure I understand the argument, please?
I'm going to throw this in the trash. Never mind. Yeah. I said at the end of our conversation about 6 that if we manage to record an entire episode on 7, it's either a sign that we're really good at this or we're really bad at this. Or that these are incredibly rich papers that when you read them for a third or fourth time, you really realize that even one that you might consider as a, forgive me for being impious, but a throwaway.
Yeah.
It's really worth studying in detail.
Look, and we're just skimming across the surface of these as well. I don't mean across the surface. I mean, we're getting into them, but I mean, we're not getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual controversies, which conceivably, especially the people of New York to whom these papers are addressed in the main, would have understood exactly what Publius is talking about. I mean, that's also what's really interesting, too, is if you have a decent or tolerable understanding of human nature and you believe it and you take Publius's word for it and your own experience backs it up, the specific experience of the states is needed really just to undermine the anti-federalists' argument. But if we were building government in a vacuum, which you never are, of course, but if you were just building a city in speech and you were taking in your city in speech human nature as granted, as understood, you would still get to this point. That's another way of saying something interesting. Look at what Locke does to human nature. And he still is going to make arguments that aren't, I mean, Publius's arguments aren't that far outside of the scope of Lockean understanding of human beings, even though we have a tabula rasa with Locke, even though we're starting with human beings as individuals in a pre-political state of nature, even though it has its challenges, because Locke from the beginning is talking about us in relation with each other, even though we're individuals from the beginning. But you can see that way of thinking about human beings is at home here, more or less. Yeah, because consent is the basis of good government here at the end of the day. It's showing our aversion to violence while also showing our tendency and readiness to violence. And it's also showing a decent respect to our opinions and calling upon us to deliberate. It's playing on our fear of violence. It's playing on our hopes of security in our property. This is a part of the civic education being offered here, or the education being offered here, or if you want to be nasty, the manipulation. Yeah, it's good. Publius is pretty good. Hey, well, I'm going to go. I'm going to eat some dinner. You need to eat some dinner too, I'm sure.
What's on the menu tonight?
Scallops and bacon.
Lovely.
This has been the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpauir.